There are houses in Ottawa right now that I would not wish on my worst enemy. And these places are not falling apart on the surface. In fact, a lot of them show really beautifully when you first walk through them. It's because I know what's going on underneath the surface may cost my clients big money down the road. After years of walking through Ottawa homes and buying a few of my own, there are a few types of houses I would not buy, no matter how good the price looks. So if you're house hunting in Ottawa right now, these are 5 key things I want you to watch out for and spot before you fall in love with a house, because it's much harder to walk away once you're emotionally attached to a place. 2 quick rules that are going to be consistent throughout the video here. First is cheap, visible stuff tells you about the expensive, hidden stuff. If a seller or a flipper cuts some corners on stuff that you can see, there's a very good chance that same level of craftsmanship is going on beneath the surface. And second is if a house is hard or expensive to get insurance for, that tells you something about the level of risk that you're taking when you buy a property. So keep those kind of in your mind as we're going through the list here. House type number 1 is the century home. And this one actually hurts me a little bit because I really like a nice older home. They are genuinely beautiful places. Places like the Glebe, Centertown, New Edinburgh have some of the most beautiful houses in the city, and they are over 100 years old. And the craftsmanship is real. It's something that you do not get anymore in the current new builds. But that charm comes with a bill that's hiding beneath the surface. A lot of these places have been extensively renovated, but a lot of them have also had 5 or 6 different owners and a few different partial renovations. And at that point, the more important question isn't what was updated, it's what wasn't updated in that time. There are 2 specific things that tend to come out of these places that cost the most. The first is the wiring. If the house has any knob and tube wiring, you've got an insurance problem before you've even got to deal with the safety problem. A lot of insurers in Ontario will not write a new home insurance policy on a place that has active knob and tube, or they'll charge much, much more than they would for a normal property. And even then, they'll probably insist that you rewire the whole house in the next few months in order to keep that policy active. A full rewire of a century home in Ottawa can range anywhere from the low tens of thousands of dollars all the way up to north of $50,000 if you're rewiring a large century home. Because with knob and tube, it's not like updating aluminum wiring where you can just pigtail copper onto the ends of the outlets. With knob and tube, they have to go through the walls, rip out the drywall, and basically replace the entire system. It's a much more comprehensive job. The second thing that really tends to hit century homes is the plumbing. If you've got old lead or galvanized lines, that means repiping the entire house, which is easily also into the tens of thousands of dollars. Old piping also tends to have asbestos wrapped around the tubes, and there's also the older asbestos floor tiles to consider. So it's not something you can just rip out on your own to save the money. You do have to get a certified contractor in there who's able to deal with those hazardous materials. Asbestos isn't the end of the world if it's just sitting behind the walls, but as soon as you start cutting into it or ripping it out, it does become dangerous. I actually had a younger couple who was dealing with something like this last year. They were looking at a home in the West End. I think it was a century home. It might have been like 80, 90 years old, but it had a lot of this stuff. It had the asbestos, it had a little bit of mold in the attic actually, and it had some older electrical. Now they ended up walking away from this place, but not before they spent $4,000 or $5,000 on all these different environmental and electrical inspections to see if this place that they had fallen in love with was something that they could salvage. Home type number 2 is anything that has been flipped. And I'm going to be careful here because I don't want to throw shade on every investor who buys an older house, renovates it, and then resells it. People are allowed to do that to make money, and a lot of them do quality work. But over the last few years, a lot of Ottawa homes got bought, kind of lipsticked over in a hurry, spending as little money as possible, and then flipped to cash in on a hot real estate market. And the workmanship on some of these is pretty rough. This is exactly where the first rule that I mentioned really earns its keep. When I'm talking about a flip, I look at the cheapest visible stuff first. Things like the trim, the caulking, paint lines. And the logic here is if you notice flaws in these things, if you notice some baseboards that are misaligned or some flooring that doesn't look like it was installed quite correctly, start to think about like, okay, if they didn't get this cheap stuff done properly, what's going on beneath the surface? Did they make any effort to repair what's going on under there? And if they did they cut any corners like they did with the stuff that's going on the surface? That is a warning sign, and that is something that when I see it, I will warn clients against buying. And it's something that personally I don't think I would ever invest into because I'd just be too worried about what I was missing. A home inspection can only go so far. A good way you can protect yourself against this, or at least know if you're walking into a flip before you go and see the property, is if you're not working with an agent already, you can go on House Sigma, look at the sales history of the property, and if you see an old listing from a year or two ago that looks completely different than the updated listing you're looking at today, there's a very good chance that this is a flip. This is somebody who purchased it relatively cheap, renovated it for probably as little money as they could, and are now trying to sell it for profit. House type number 3 is one that has bad windows. Now, this one is not insurmountable. If you price the replacement windows into your offer, then this is something that you can deal with. But the reason I flag it is because a lot of people see it as kind of a smaller problem than it actually is. In Ottawa, of all places where we have hot summers and very cold winters, windows are not a cosmetic item. The quality of your windows reflects directly on your heating and cooling bill. If you walk in and you see fog or condensation trapped between the window panes, that is a failed seal. The insulating value of that window is basically zero at this point. Now picture that across the entire house through a cold snap in February. You're going to be paying for a ton of extra heat. And while spot window replacements are a thing, generally speaking, if one of the main windows is going, it's probably the entire house or a good chunk of the house that needs to be replaced at the same time. A whole house window replacement in Ottawa probably averages somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000 depending on the size of the house. And it is worth doing because good windows can cut a heating bill by 10 to 25%. Number 4, and this is probably the one that I feel the most strongly about, I would never buy a house in a floodplain in Ottawa. And I don't just mean one that has a history of flooding. I mean anything that's in a regulated floodplain, even if it has stayed bone dry for its entire life. I've talked in other videos about the 2017 and 2019 flooding that we had along the Ottawa River, so this is not an abstract thing. In communities like Constance Bay, Cumberland, parts of Britannia, this is something that really happens. And what a lot of people miss here is that water is only half of the problem here. The other and possibly bigger half is the insurance hassle and the resale. In a low-risk area, overland water coverage might run you a couple $100 a year, and in a genuinely high-risk flood zone, you're looking at more like $800 to $2,000 per year if you can get coverage at all. And a growing number of these homes are becoming effectively uninsurable, which means they're also becoming effectively unsellable to anybody who might need a mortgage because you can't get a mortgage unless you have valid home insurance in place. Even a single water damage claim in Ontario can bump your premium significantly. And what the seller is going to say a lot of the time is, oh, well, it's a 300-year or 500-year floodplain. It's never had water. A 500-year floodplain means a 1 in 500 chance in a given year of a flood happening on paper. But we just had 2 record-breaking floods in 3 years. And I wouldn't want to bet the biggest purchase of my life on a statistic that the climate is actively rewriting, it seems like. So if you're someone who's buying on the water right now on purpose, whether it's a place on the river or a cottage, just make sure you're walking in with your eyes wide open about the insurance risks. Home type number 5 is a house that has had a fire. Now, for me personally, this is a hard no, and even if the repair looks flawless, I still wouldn't buy a place like this. The reality is that on the insurance side, again, once a house has had a fire and a claim's been paid out, the next insurer is going to ask a lot more questions, charge you more for insurance, and in some cases, decline the insurance outright. If it was a small, contained thing, you might be completely fine, but if the fire got up to the framing or the rafters, I don't care how cheap the house is, this is something you may want to consider walking away from. If this saved you from even one of these, I consider that a huge win. If you're house hunting in Ottawa and want a second set of eyes on a place like this, or you just want the seller's disclosure or someone to check to make sure whether or not this place is in a floodplain, feel free to reach out. If you're looking for floodplain specifically, you can also check out Geo Ottawa. I will put the link to that in the description of this video. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch and have a wonderful rest of your day.